romance, love, social convention, gender roles, and religion. Charlotte Bronte's most famous novel challenges ideas on all these topics, and we are here to discuss it. I'm Charlene.
And I'm Mike.
And this is Jane Eyre Files. Chapter 16. Wholesome Discipline. Hello, husband.
Hello, indigent and insignificant plebeian.
Burn.
We're going to get into it, but there's no Rochester in this chapter.
No Rochester.
So we don't get any cute pet names for her. There's not a whole lot of expressions where people are, I think there's no one else really talking to Jane.
Except she's talking to herself.
And she has this real self-destructive, soliloquy, internal monologue at the end. And so I thought I'd spice it up a little bit because I'm always saying cute things to you. So I'll hit you with something a little bit more deep.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that. There's not really a lot of substance in this chapter because I feel like it's just developing the story. So there's just more setup for what's going to happen in this next part.
But it's good. It's good character development. Again, we're going to talk about it a lot on this podcast. We have already. The difference between something being cinematic and literary, where it's like with books, you can just take time. And I mean, unfortunately, I feel like sometimes that keeps me from reading books. Sometimes they can be too thick.
Too much time.
Yeah, but they're really, Charlotte's doing a really good job of setting up all this scenarios, whether it be character development or in this case, her attraction with Rochester.
Yeah.
We had the really pivotal moment in the previous chapter, and now we have another chapter where she's basically thinking about what happened in the previous chapter, right?
Yeah, that's
and
true.
She's ready to act on it, and he ain't there.
So let's get to the SparkNote summary for Chapter 16. The next morning, Jane is shocked to learn that the near tragedy of the night before has caused no scandal. The servants believe Rochester to have fallen asleep with a lit candle by his bed, and even Grace Poole shows no sign of guilt or remorse. Jane cannot imagine why an attempted murderer is allowed to continue working at Thornfield. She realizes that she is beginning to have feelings for Rochester and is disappointed that he will be away from Thornfield for several days. He has left to attend a party where he will be in the company of Blanche Ingram, a beautiful lady. Jane scolds herself for being disappointed by the news, and she resolves to restrain her flights of imaginative fancy by comparing her own portrait to one she has drawn of Blanche Ingram, noting how much plainer she is than the beautiful Blanche.
Oh, but Jane's so much more beautiful. Inner beauty.
Inner beauty, yes. Personality.
Mm-hmm.
So this chapter just enhances the mystery at Thornfield. We finally get to meet Grace Poole and
I guess
get a little conversation.
We haven't really met her, have we?
It's all been secondhand. Jane's talking about Grace Poole, seeing her walking in and out of the third story.
Yeah, I feel like some of the film adaptations, we maybe see her a little bit more because they've only got a shorter amount of time to kind of set up this misdirection. And so they're like, oh, this is, you see Grace more in the movies than you do in the books, I guess, yeah.
That's true, yes. And then, so that's the first part of this chapter, and then the second part is the romance, and Jane's feelings for Rochester becoming stronger, and she's trying to fight them.
Oh, she's swooning, And it's funny because, as soon as she learns about Blanche, all of a sudden she just gets all introspective, self-conscious.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the true sign of falling for him is that, she doesn't think she's good enough, especially after Mrs. Fairfax mentions their age difference and all that. But let's start with Grace. What's the deal with Grace Poole?
I don't know. I mean, as a reader now, you looking back at this chapter, you kind of know where she stands. So I find it interesting to see her as, Jane's thinking that she's a potential murderer, that she's she's up to nefarious things at Thornfield. But then when Charlotte and Jane describes her, it's such a counterpoint to all this intrigue and mystery because she's just so unsuspicious. Some of the words that Jane uses to describe Grace is staid and taciturn looking. She's wearing brown, is boring. She has a hard forehead. I'm not sure what that means. She has commonplace features and she's phlegmatic. So it's just boring. Like you don't expect her to be wielding any, torches in the middle of the night.
Well, yeah. And like you said, I think Charlotte's doing this on purpose to sort of misdirect you to figure, because, whether Jane believes it or not, I feel like Charlotte wants you to believe that Grace is behind it.
Well,
as a reader.
I wonder if it's like, like misdirection. So it's Charlotte knows that she's not the one at fault here. So it would, like any good mystery, you kind of get the clues ahead of time, so you can try to figure it out. So it's like, she doesn't have any of the hallmarks of someone who might be doing these strange things at night, laughing weirdly. But Jane doesn't have any other answers, so she just continues to think, it must be her.
There's no one else in the house, right? So I mean, it's fine, yeah.
No,
but yeah,
nobody.
You're right. It's a very awkward exchange because it's like, Grace's, her behavior doesn't really seem to make any sense if she's the one who's at fault. Yeah. She's just kind of going on with, because she knows what's, being hidden in all of this. And so I don't know. For lack of a better word, I'll just say I was a little perplexed. Yeah. Because it's, Jane is ready to be accusatory and judge and jury kind of a thing, whereas Grace is just kind of, what
she has
me?
No
but,
idea.
Yeah. But what have you heard? What did Rochester tell you? Yeah.
Yeah. Rochester throwing me under the bus again.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I was wondering for you, like when you first read it, I guess you probably went along with what Jane was thinking. You thought that Grace Poole was behind everything.
Well, I mean, I feel like, before this chapter, maybe, again, I see Charlotte does kind of steer the reader in that direction. Yeah. But then after I read this chapter and you see her behavior and you're right, and the way that she's made out to be such a boring, character, it's like the mystery, I guess the mystery just continues to grow. I mean, what about you when the first time you read this? Were you, I mean, you've read a lot of Agatha Christie at that point, right?
Well, I read a bit. In high school, I started reading Agatha Christie as well, so it was around the same time. So maybe not. I didn't read as much Agatha Christie at that time.
So you knew,
but I knew. I read a lot of mysteries, like Nancy Drew and Boxcar Children,
Hardy Boys.
I was more Nancy Drew.
Nancy Drew. Okay. Boxcar Children, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So usually those are the Scooby-Doo villains, right? Where they kind of you can tell a little bit.
Yeah, they're broadcasting it more probably. Yeah. But I feel like I was probably thinking that she was behind it. Maybe there was something else going on in addition, but but who cares? I want them to get together. I want to know more about this romance. Let's skip over this part.
There's a conspiracy that Grace is just part of this global web of deceit.
Yeah, there must be some reason why, she might be doing it. Maybe she's crazy. What? Is there crazy people at Thornfield Hall?
Who just sit in the room and, what is she, knitting? Is that when she was,
something
when
like
she
that.
She's doing some sort of needle point or something, right?
I think she's fixing the curtains in Rochester's room.
Yeah, that's crazy behavior. Fixing curtains. But the Grace stuff is kind of secondary in this chapter because now I feel like we're getting more of the passion of this book. And these are the parts of the chapter that I really enjoyed. And that is, Jane sort of allowing herself to acknowledge that Rochester might have feelings for her, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of strange for Jane to try to get her mind around because I think she understands that this is kind of a big deal. Like, she can't really expect that he has feelings for her, but then his actions and behavior towards her points her in that direction. And now what is she going to do? The chapter begins with, I both wished and feared to see Rochester. Like, she's torn between these two feelings. As the chapter goes on, maybe she leans more towards one or the other feeling of like, maybe this is something that could happen, or maybe I need to slow my roll here.
Well, and I know we talked about it in other episodes, but it just seems like she's never felt like this, I would imagine. Yeah. So this is all new to her, and she's dealing with some sort of authority figure, and she just can't immediately assume he's going to like her, especially the way with some of his behavior. Yeah. And so I liked in the previous chapter where she talks about, just seeing him in the hallway kind of gave her a little heart aflutter, and so now that we've had this, like I said, this incredibly dramatic moment with the bed on fire, and so she's got to come to grips with this, and it's a shame that she doesn't get to see him, right? Because now this is where that part where you pull him aside and say what's going on here, and because she seems the kind of person that would want to put it out in the open, right?
I wonder. Jane? I mean, would she say something? She'd probably seek his attention or his company and kind of see how he acts. I wouldn't think she'd say anything.
She wouldn't say anything?
No. But yeah, because I feel like I understand how she felt. Obviously, in that time of when I read it as a teen, I had a lot of crushes.
Did you have some crushes?
A little bit, and similar to Jane, I would never speak of it.
Never?
No. Never. No, I don't think I I was capable of sharing that I liked anybody. Like, it just felt so intimate and strange, and that hopelessness of her crush, it feels very familiar. And I enjoy that part of the story because, especially as a teenager, I really identified with that. And then as an adult, I feel for Jane in this chapter.
Now, before me, had you ever had a crush on an older man?
Yes. I mean, everyone
I don't mean
has schoolgirl.
celebrities, but maybe
Everyone has a schoolgirl crush on their teacher, right?
The teacher? Really? You had a crush on a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, epitome of Jane Eyre here, where she has a crush on this authority figure in her life, and it's not going to go anywhere, maybe. But
Is this high school or college?
This is high school. Yeah, more high school, for sure.
Wow. All right. I learned something new.
I have not told you this, so I guess.
I think I've told you I had a crush on one of my teachers in high school, but I think she was like fresh out of college.
Oh, yeah.
She was fairly young.
No, I think my teacher was a little older than that.
Yeah. And then I had a crush on a teacher in college, and I ran into her at a movie theater, and she said, we were sitting in different rows, and she's like, oh, you can come sit by me. And then I think I made some comment to her. I don't know if I told her. I didn't think I told her she was attractive or anything like that. I made some comment about being, I get to be with you today or whatever. And she said, get a grip. And so my friends would always, whenever I would make comments about her, they would always say, get a grip.
Oh,
get a grip.
Wow. And you told the story to your friends.
I told the story.
You laid yourself open.
Well, because my friends were in that class, were in my class with her.
Yeah.
So they knew her,
they understood your feelings.
Yeah. Because it was this little running joke we had was that, I had a crush on the teacher. And then, yeah. So get a grip. It cracks me up that she said get a grip.
Well, that's what Jane is trying to do in this chapter. The connections. See, if you had read this in high school, you might have felt seen like I did.
Yeah. Because I think I know for a fact that all the crushes I had, many of them, almost all of them went unrequited, but I still tried to act on them because I guess that's what the guys are supposed to do.
Yeah.
Rochester's a little bit more.
And I'm waiting for the guy to come to me.
Yeah, that's true.
And hoping he will.
Yeah.
He did not.
Yeah, you went to school with a lot of nerds, and I'm sure the crushes that you have were nerds, and those nerdy guys weren't gonna make a move. But you need sometimes, if you behave like that, you do need a voice of reason, and so I feel like Mrs. Fairfax is the grounding.
Yeah, because I wonder if she sees any of this in Jane. Like, she's seeing that Jane is a little too attached to Rochester, or Rochester's paying a little too much attention. She's a little afraid.
Has she had other governesses that had a crush on him? Remember when she first gets there, she keeps asking about Rochester, and Fairfax doesn't want to talk about it? Maybe she's not the first one.
And then here, at the end of this chapter, Miss Fairfax drops the knowledge that Mr. Rochester is away, and he's attending a party that has a very beautiful woman that they've been romantically attached in the past, Blanche Ingram.
They haven't attached, huh? Is that what I thought it said that they were like...
I don't think
she was a belle of a ball.
Attached formally, but that people say, they're going to get married,
But she's way too young. She's 25. A full 7 years older than Jane. Right?
Yeah, that's way too young. Probably the maturity level, it's not the same.
I did. The funny thing was, it was funny to watch Jane getting really defensive because Fairfax is just like, oh, she's too young, she's 25, and then Jane's just like, oh, but younger. There's been a greater. Other couples have had that greater age disparity. It's been fine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I will it into existence.
That's funny because I thought when I read that part, I feel like it's more that Jane is trying to tell herself this is likely to happen. So she's saying, oh, well, that's nothing, that there's an age gap. They might still get married. I didn't think it's referring to Jane herself. But that's interesting.
That's kind of how I read it.
Yeah, okay.
Because I feel like sometimes Jane feels this, this is wrong. He's twice my age, And so, but then maybe she does know, apparently, she does know of other couples who have had a great age disparity.
Yeah, I guess. She probably read it in some books.
Ah, the mist is cleared. He'll have a favourable day for his journey.
Journey? Is Mr. Rochester gone anywhere? I did not know he was out.
He set off the moment he had breakfasted. He has gone to Mr. Eshton's place, the Lees, 10 miles beyond Millcote. Quite a party is assembled there, I believe. Lord Ingram, Sir George
Do you expect him back tonight?
No, nor tomorrow either. Oh, Mr. Rochester is a general favourite in society. The ladies are very fond of him. Though you would not think that his appearance was calculated to recommend him particularly in their eyes.
There are ladies at the Lees, of course.
Oh, there'll be Mrs. Ashton and her 3 daughters, the Honourable Blanche and Mary Ingram. Blanche is the belle of every ball in the county.
She's greatly admired.
Oh, indeed. She's so tall, so graceful. Raven hair with eyes as brilliant as her jewels. And so accomplished. She plays and sings superbly.
And Miss Ingram is not yet married? Oh, no, of course she could not be.
Are you sure you're not feverish, Miss Jane?
Oh, no.
This chapter ends with Jane painting her portrait, like examining her feelings and saying, I think that Blanche Ingram is a more perfect match for Rochester. Obviously, she's more beautiful than me, accomplished, that it's not likely that someone like me is going to catch his eye. I don't know what I was thinking, basically. And I just wanted to point out that in the Broadway musical by John Caird and Paul Gordon, there's a song called Painting Her Portrait. And
Really?
I really love this song. It's all internal, it's Jane's feelings and as she's drawing her portrait and she's singing. And it just perfectly captures this sense of self-destructiveness that I feel that coming from Jane, that she almost really hates herself for how she's feeling about Rochester and what it's doing to her. And I just find that so emotionally impactful of that she just has, this hope, and it just gets crushed absolutely by the end of this chapter.
And it's very weird behavior, I think, to immediately start painting your rival.
I wouldn't think that's healthy, no.
Yeah. And I'm sure, knowing Jane, she's talented enough that she's going to make Blanche's portrait much more prettier than Blanche ever is, because you've never seen her. She's just going off of Fairfax's description, which means Jane would be a really good police sketch artist.
So she should have drawn.
She could draw herself.
Yeah. Well,
but then you don't want it.
She did it,
because because the drawing of herself is most likely going to downplay a lot of her great qualities and features, and so that she can compare them.
She drew it roughly, it seems like, with some chalk and, just very harshly probably, where it was Blanche. She took her time. She used her best paints and pencils and really made it a beautiful portrait. And that's not really fair.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, we always talk about how Jane is growing so well, and even though she's only 18, she seems to be wise beyond her years, but is it still somewhat immature for her to be so self-conscious the minute she learns about Blanche? Because we don't know what's going on with them. I mean, she hasn't even seen the two of them together, so she could see how they behave. She's going to, I guess. Spoiler. But I don't know. It seems like she's 18, but she should be more of a grown-up.
That's true. I mean, she has shown herself to be very mature throughout these chapters, but she is still 18, and she's never felt these feelings before. You got to think she's very young, and this is totally understandable that she's trying to do whatever she can to manage these feelings and her expectations and make sure that she's not going to think these things about Mr. Rochester when she sees him again, because she knows that it can't go anywhere, and it's just hurting herself.
Now, in your experience, whenever you found out that your crush was seeing somebody else, how did you take it?
Oh, I painted the portrait. No.
You probably would. I went on Photoshop, and I just,
I picked a picture of myself and drew X's over it. No. I don't know. I feel like it was more, I didn't have expectations that this would happen. So, just don't think about it too much. Go dive into the next romantic read and read about some other fictional romance that comes to fruition.
Okay. Because I know I used to fall hard. And so there were times where...
Oh, you were crushed?
I would get very devastated if somebody that I liked either didn't like me back or was like someone else. Or there was one girl I had a crush on who wound up going out with one of my friends, and it was just like, oh man, him. He's a nice guy, but it was to have it be that close.
Sure. It firsthand like that.
That one really hurt, yeah. But again, that's why now we're curious to see what's going to happen when Rochester comes back, because he's been with Blanche, but that last meeting that he had with Jane was pretty emotionally powerful. Yeah. So now this is where I think, we want Jane to show some maturity, but I think she should totally just play it cool, and see how Rochester behaves.
I think she has to.
Well, she has to. It's true.
That's her position at this place.
I'm worried that she's going to be a little more passive aggressive when she doesn't have to be. She can just continue on what she's doing and just pretend like,
okay.
Beds catch on fire all the time. I've had to. You're not the first bed I've had to put out on fire with a jug of water. So she can just be like, whatevs.
Oh yeah, well that's probably a different story, but we'll see what happens in the next chapter for Jane.
Now, didn't you? I always like to look at the interesting context of these chapters. I think you told me that when this book was published as a 3-volume set.
Yes. So in that time, when books were they were pretty expensive, and publishers and consumers, they worked out this system where they had this circulating library, which wasn't a free public library like we have today. It was a subscription-based library where people, maybe they're on vacation or, maybe they're at home. They'll come in, they'll pick up a book, and it's usually the first volume. Let's say it's the first volume of a set, like Jane Eyre Part 1. And then they will come home, read it, and then they'll go back and they'll pick up the next one. So they have repeat customers. It's a little bit more steady income for someone to have these people coming in on a regular basis trying to pick up these volumes. So there's many books that were published in this way at that time. Mm-hmm. I want to say Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, Charlotte's sister, is a shorter novel, and it's like 2 volumes.
It's shorter? Man, it felt longer. It did feel longer.
It is 2 volumes, and at that time, since they really wanted that 3-volume set, when Anne Bronte wrote her book, Agnes Grey, they decided to publish them all together as a 3-book set. So it's Wuthering Heights and Agnes Grey, which is a little weird because they're not really related. But I think that at that time, too, when Jane Eyre was published first, people thought, oh, this Currer Bell...
These are all the Bells, right?
They were all the same person writing these books, so I'm just going to pick up Wuthering Heights and Agnes Grey because this person wrote this wonderful book called Jane Eyre, so I might be interested. But yeah, so I think it's fun to think that in Jane Eyre, this chapter 16, is the first chapter of the 2nd volume. So that chapter 15, which was a previous episode on our podcast, it was a cliffhanger basically. It was
Total
Mr. Rochester. Yeah, it was a great cliffhanger where Rochester's bed was on fire, and then Jane saves life, and then Jane having these feelings and end. Now I got to go pick up the next volume.
Same bat time, same Jane time, same Jane channel. Yeah, because I feel like there's a definite line of delineation here. Like you said, we had that really dramatic event, and then Rochester's gone.
Yeah,
and so it's like a whole new day.
And the fact that this does feel like the setup of what will happen in this next volume, the rest of this mystery and romance. We're going to get a little backstory here.
Off the top of your head, I believe there's 3 long-form BBC adaptations, 73, 83, 06.
Yeah.
Do any of them end their episode after the fire?
Yeah, most of them do.
Do they seem
because it is a good stopping point and a great cliffhanger, so that it's like if they'll end it right. Well, I should say 1973 ends it after Jane saves the fire, just like the book. And then, if I remember correctly, at least if I remember 2006, though, that one had a very dramatic ending point of the episode where Jane goes into her room and the bed's on fire, and it's like a huge blaze. Like it's, Mr. Rochester would have been dead. This is a large fire, and then that's how it ends. And then 1983, I can't remember.
That's chopped up to a lot of episodes. So
it's like 11 episodes, 30 minutes each. So. I'm pretty sure it ends on a fire. I don't know if she sees a fire or if it's after she rescues him, which I'm kind of leaning towards the fact that she probably rescued him already, and then it ends the chapter or the episode. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a very, you said that especially when the fire is blazing out of control when you watch it on screen, it's very cinematic, as we always like to say. And yeah, it's a good place to end.
Yeah. As we're wrapping up this episode, Mike, we're going to end with our meaningful passage or quote. So what is yours today?
Well, mine comes from about halfway through the chapter. We've talked about Jane's maturity level and, self-destructive behavior. But also, I know we mentioned in a previous episode about like hateful feelings. And I always say it's not good for the blood and all that. And so there's a quote, it's sort of a internal monologue that Jane has after her experience with Grace, where she says, quote, "I hastened to drive from my mind the hateful notion I had been conceiving respecting Grace Poole. It disgusted me. I compared myself with her and found we were different. Bessie Levin had said I was quite a lady, and she spoke truth. I was a lady. and now I looked much better than I did when Bessie saw me. I had more color and more flesh, more life, more vivacity, because I had brighter hopes and keener enjoyments. Like, I like the first part of that where she's basically saying, like, I don't want to have this hateful notion about Grace. It doesn't make me feel good.
Yeah.
You know, I'm much better. I'm happier. I'm in this place. I'm sort of in love. You know, and I feel bad because this is right before she has her conversation with Mrs. Fairfax and learns about Blanche.
Yeah.
Because she's still in that positive frame of mind, and you just want to be like, no, stay in that mindset. It's so good. But
Yeah,
I like that passage a lot.
I think that Jane is kind of putting down Grace Poole in this passage. I think that's kind of funny, but
She's boring. We've already established she's boring. Jane's a little plain. She's a plain
Mr.
Jane.
Rochester could like her. This is impossible.
Yeah, she's Jane's very plain too, but I think Grace is boring too.
No, but yeah, it is nice that Jane does understand that she is happier now, and that makes her more attractive. And that's true for everybody.
So isn't that what they always say? Like, you know, positivity and good self-image and self-awareness and the right mindset does make you more attractive to the opposite sex. If you're confident, you have a lot of confidence in yourself.
Yeah. Oh, poor Jane.
Yeah. So what was your meaningful passage?
So mine is, this is not like the complete quote. It's kind of a section of it. I just find that it's very indicative of what Jane's feeling right now. And it is madness in all women to let a secret love kindle within, which, if unreturned and unknown, must devour the life that feeds it. So it just shows what we talked about earlier about Jane being so young, and, you know, elements of her that she's still an impressionable lady, that she hasn't had these emotions before. But she has a little bit of good sense to know that this is not a good thing for her to have this unrequited love, because it's already probably taking a toll on her that she doesn't like. She's putting herself in a mindset she doesn't like. So in a way, you know, she has the level of maturity. It's just that her emotions are overwhelming her.
And it totally screws with her work-life balance.
Obsessing over Mr. Rochester while Adele is trying to learn from her.
Yeah. Like, is she going to try to pay more attention if Rochester passes by while she's teaching Adele, you know, like.
Yeah, and this is indicative too of something that Jane has to deal with throughout this book up until a certain point, of balancing these emotions that she has with her sense and reason, and she is going to fight to keep that balance. Yeah.
Now that you mention it, I mean, having read the book already, I know that Jane will always act in the best interest of, I don't know, I wouldn't say what society thinks, but what she believes is right. Yeah, she's a very reasonable person. That's a good way of choice of words that you had there. Yeah. And so we're going to get to some more elements later where it's like, oh, you should act with your heart, but then she acts with her head instead. Yeah. And when she acts with her heart, it's not necessarily the best thing for her. She needs to douse it with water. Quench those flames. Yes, the burning bed of her heart. Exactly. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. This really helps us grow and reach new listeners. If you want to talk Jane Eyre with me online, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at AirGuide. That's EYRE. And if you want to hear more from me, I host my own podcast called Out of Touchstone, where my good friend Chad and I discuss all the films that Disney produced for their Touchstone Pictures label. You can also find me on Twitter at Mike DeKalb. Thank you, and farewell for the present.